Hi there. Well, I wonder if you've managed to get over Christmas. We've got the new year coming anyway, so we'll have to deal with that. And I should be doing first footing as well. And for those of you that don't know what it is, you have to stand outside the door before midnight with some bread, some coal, some salt, and some money, and quite often that ends up being my wife's purse because the money's in the purse, her purse. And then I knock on the door, and then I'm let in at midnight, and it sees the new year in anyway. Well, that's the theory anyway. I don't notice any difference in the year, that carries on after that, but all the same. Anyway, after watching Phil Aston's video on record collecting and what media do you use, whether you use vinyl, CD, streaming, etc. Well, what I would say is this. There was a question posed: are you a collector or are you a hoarder? Now, after I watched Phil's video, my wife asked me if I'm a hoarder or I'm a collector. I had to stop and think about that for a minute or two. And I said, well, I'm a collector because I know where everything is pretty much. I know what I've got, I should say. I'm not a hoarder. I think my wife might be a hoarder. I asked her about this in a very brave moment, and that included shoes, handbags, makeup, and a couple of other things that I won't go into anyway. And she didn't seem very keen to give me an answer to those questions. Anyhow, my collecting started out as a child. Some of the first music I remember hearing on radio in the 50s was the Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, and Elvis Presley. That was when we lived in a very old derelict house in the centre of Birmingham, but that's a longer story. So that's where my love of music started. Anyway, when I got a bit older and I started getting some pocket money, etc., I would go with my mother to a thing called jumble sales. You remember that, jumble sales? And I had to hold her place in the queue while she went to do a bit of shopping, you see. So I'd be much shorter, and all these ladies, obviously much older than me, and they'd try and go in front of me. So I had to hold my own with my place in the queue. Anyway, I'd get in there and my mum would look for some bargain one way or another. I was interested in something else though. I saw this big black box, and it turned out that it was a wind-up gramophone that played 78 RPM records, heavy shellac discs. You probably remember them, but they were quite brittle. Well, I bought this wind-up record player for, I think it was something like 2 shillings or something like that. I'd saved up some money in pocket money, and also it came with a load of 78 records. In fact, there were so many, my mum had to help me carry them home with her other things. I got it home, checked it out, put the record on, started playing it, and I thought, you had to wind this up. And I thought, oh, this is great, this is. I can listen to records and they're my own, and it's like giveaway prices, these 78 RPM records. And some of the first things that I had were Sandy Powell, who was a British comedian on the radio, etc. Sandy Powell at the Nudist Colony. I thought it was a bit racy for somebody of my age to hear. And then, but they were funny, silly and funny. Then there were classical records. I can't remember how often I had to wind it up after how many records. But I remember there were some records that were American records, American artists. Now, I think it was Edmund Hockridge singing 16 Tons. 16 Tons, number 9 Coal, Another Day Older and Deeper in Debt. Anyway, it was on the Columbia label, which was a bright purple label. Very attractive. So I started listening to these things over and over, and there were various other records people I'd never heard of before. And after a period of about 6 or 8 months, I'd collected quite a few of these records, and even then I stored them as carefully as I could because I knew they were brittle and they'd crack, etc. And you had to replace the needle every so often. Can't remember how many it lasted, but reasonable amount. It was easy to change, but it was good fun, and that started me into record collecting. Sometime later I had to get rid of the record player because my brother and I shared a bedroom and there really wasn't enough room. He was very good at electronics, and first of all he had a Philips portable radio, transistor radio. So when he was doing his studying upstairs, he'd have Luxembourg on, so we heard all sorts of pop things on there, and of course the signal would go in, come out, go in, come out, as it did. Some nights you could get a sort of constant signal, so it was pretty good there. After a while, he got some components together and he made basically a Dansette record player, but probably better quality in terms of components than a Dansette. And then I was exposed to all sorts of things like the Beach Boys, played over and over again, a greatest hits LP of the Supremes, and various singles. Oh, and also he had Ella Fitzgerald sings Cole Porter, Volume 1 and 2. I used to play that a lot. And also Oscar Peterson plays Cole Porter. And I used to play that. And oftentimes I'd play these things while he was out. And I was so careful with the records. I'd just put them back and he'd be none the wiser. The other thing that he was into was Dusty Springfield. That was a joy hearing her. First of all, it was the Springfields. So I got into listening to their music, and of course I was very attracted actually to Dusty Springfield, and I still am. Got virtually all her albums, and it's been a bit of a lifelong passion. Anyway, years progressed on. My brother did his 2 degrees. He moved out, did his 2 degrees, and then he went over to America to live, because he got a job with General Electric, and he still lives there now. But that's what kicked off my musical interest. So it's been non-stop really. Apart from when I went to live in America, I entrusted somebody to look after my records, and I paid them to ship my records over. Unfortunately, at that time, I think there must have been quite a lot of LPs, Jimi Hendrix, bootlegs, etc., etc. I think it was about 18 at this time. And unfortunately, the records never arrived. And I'd intended to stay in America, but then I ended up having to come back home. But the records never arrived, and he disappeared, the money disappeared, and it was a bit of a bitter experience. So that's how my record collecting started out. I've always had very wide Catholic tastes, and I listen to all sorts of things, probably like Phil Aston does now. So that is basically the first part. So I shall do a second part to this, and I hope it's not bored you too much. Okay, thank you for watching. Put a tick in the box or any little comment that if you've enjoyed this.